What's up, Psychedelic Investors? My name is James, and you're watching The Psychedelic Investor, your number one news source for psychedelic stocks and everything MindMed. In today's episode, we're going to cover the three most recent press releases MindMed has given the public and discuss what they mean. And today, we're actually going to have two episodes, one to present the news updates, and then a second one which will take place in the speculation zone to discuss why these may be super important. So make sure you stick around for both. First up, we have news from the end of January that MindMed has started their Phase 1 clinical trial combining MDMA with LSD. Trippy. Why combine these two substances? What diseases could it help alleviate? And what is the timeline for this project? Stay tuned to find out. Next, we'll cover MindMed's change in leadership structure. A CEO has stepped down. Does this mean we are seeing a Game of Thrones in the boardroom? Well, no. It's actually much more practical than that. Here, we'll cover why did they do this, and how will it affect MindMed going forward, specifically with their NASDAQ uplisting application. And finally, and most importantly, we'll talk about how MindMed is further expanding their clinical trial pipeline and IP portfolio through a partnership with a Swiss company called MindShift Compounds. This is very exciting as it adds to MindMed's ever-expanding clinical trial pipeline. Pretty soon, it's going to be hard to keep track of all of MindMed's projects. In fact, the company is starting to feel like it is 10 startups instead of one. And then, in our next video, which is being released at the same time as this one, we will hop into the speculation zone to discuss what this all means. If you're already super knowledgeable about these three press releases, you can just head over there now to the next video. I'll put a card above. I would suggest watching the first video, however, as we stop throughout the press releases to discuss what it means and what MindMed is saying, and not all of the insight that is in this video will be in the next. But first, if you enjoy this episode and find it entertaining and informative, invest in the channel with your like and subscribe. Over time, you'll see your investment grow as we continue to bring you the information that you need to know before investing in the psychedelic medicines field. And if you're feeling extra generous, leave a comment with your best guess for when MindMed stock will explode. This year after the NASDAQ? Next year? In 5 years when the company starts selling these medications? I want to know what you think. Enjoy the episode. Hey there guys, so before we begin the episode, I just want to let you know that I was just interviewed on the channel, The Medicine of Being Human. We talked about all sorts of interesting topics and I had a great time. I'm not sure if by the time this video is released if the interview will already be out, but I'll put a link in the description to the channel and also to Sina's Instagram page. I am super excited for this. It was my first time ever being interviewed. Well, at least since I scored a hat trick in Pee Wee hockey at our local village newspaper wanted to interview me. I'm kind of a big deal. But in all seriousness, it was recorded today, Tuesday, and should be released sometime on Thursday or Friday. I'll make a short video linking to the interview once it's live. But in the meantime, like I said, I will link her Instagram page and her YouTube channel in the description for anyone who wants to check out her channel before seeing my interview. And without further ado, let's hop into the subject matter of today's episode. So, first up, MindMed announced on January 20th that they have begun Phase 1 clinical trials, researching the effects of MDMA combined with LSD. So we're just going to go ahead and throw the press release up on the screen. Et voila. Diving right in, MindMed, a leading psychedelic medicine biotech company, announced today the start of the first ever clinical trial measuring and evaluating MDMA and LSD used in combination in the human body. The trial will be conducted at the University Hospital Basel, Liechti Lab in Basel, Switzerland. And I'd just like to point out again that this is another program taking place at the Liechti Lab in Switzerland. This lab seems to be the beating heart of MindMed, with most of their exciting programs taking place here. So, why are they combining LSD and MDMA? Well, MindMed writes, if administered in combination with LSD, MDMA may increase positive subjective drug effects, including positive mood and empathy, and reduce the negative emotions and anxiety that are sometimes associated with LSD, producing an overall more positive experience. MindMed is undertaking Phase 1 clinical trials to evaluate if MDMA, when balanced and used in combination with LSD, can help offset some of the known potential unpleasant effects of LSD that occur in therapy or clinical settings. MindMed is interested in understanding how to balance both MDMA and LSD in a cohesive way to create better patient outcomes and develop more advanced psychedelic-assisted therapies as MindMed expands both its R&D and commercial drug development pipeline. The study is anticipated to take around 1 year to complete. President of MindMed, Dr. Miri Halperin-Wernley, added that, "I believe that when LSD and MDMA are taken together, they have exceptional potential to open a window into our mind, which will awaken it to new levels of awareness by changing the fluidity of the state of consciousness, amplifying changed perceptions, intensifying emotions, and stimulating novel thoughts. It is like a gateway to a multi-dimensional universe." So, basically, here what is being said is that though LSD used in therapy can have tremendous results, and that is one of the overall theses of MindMed, often there can be negative side effects, as with any drug. Specifically, in some people, LSD can create feelings of anxiety and other negative emotions. The hope here is that when combined with MDMA, these effects can be lessened or removed. So, they are testing different dosage levels to see the results. And I'm not sure what confidence level MindMed has that these two drugs will work well together, if there's a good reason to think that combining these two compounds is the future of psychedelic-assisted therapy, or if they're just doing a test to see the outcomes. It's the first trial of its kind, so I would lean towards this being more of an experiment than anything else, but I'm not certain. If it is just an experiment, then I love this. The idea that MindMed is putting resources towards base discovery is amazing, and it will definitely pay off in the future. Almost every other company in this field is using defined compounds like psilocybin, so the fact that MindMed is combining different compounds is very exciting. But how will the trial be structured? Well, MindMed states, the Phase 1 double-blind placebo-controlled 4-period crossover design study officially began this week and will assess subjective and autonomic effects aiming to determine the qualitative emotional differences between a combined MDMA and LSD experience, a pure LSD experience, and a pure MDMA experience versus a placebo. Wow, that is a jargon salad. So, Phase 1 means that primarily they are testing for safety. Is it safe to take LSD and MDMA together? Yes, of course, they will also measure other variables, but the main findings will be whether or not it is safe. Placebo-controlled means that some people will be receiving nothing and some will get the cocktail, and that they won't know who is who. This will help alleviate the placebo effect. Though, I will say, if they are doing this at any dose level higher than a microdose, the participants will probably know if they got the placebo or not. They will be recording data based on both the patient's responses, the subjective data, and on biomarkers, the autonomic effects. And through this, they will decide whether a cocktail mixing LSD and MDMA is more effective in a therapy setting than MDMA or LSD alone. Returning to the why behind this study, MindMed writes, LSD in other Phase 1 clinical trials has demonstrated an acute subjective effect on the serotonin 5-HT2A receptor stimulation, leading to ego dissolution and neuroplasticity. These properties of LSD are thought to have therapeutic effects on patients suffering from mental disorders. However, in some instances, unpleasant effects can occur in therapy, causing distress to the subject through acute anxiety. If MindMed finds the Phase 1 trial results promising, it will work with expert clinicians to undertake patient studies with treatments of combining MDMA and LSD for various potential indicators and mental disorders. So, here they are just saying that if this trial is successful, they will consider combining MDMA with LSD in other clinical trials. Perhaps this means that we could see MDMA make its way into Project Lucy, which aims to treat anxiety with LSD. This initial Phase 1 trial will take a year, however, so we won't be seeing anything like this anytime soon. It will just be something to keep an eye on, though. And I'll keep most of my discussion until the second video to keep this one short-ish, which again will take place in the speculation zone. Though I will just reiterate how much I love that MindMed is continuing to branch out and try different compounds and combinations of compounds. We are still in the very early stages of psychedelic medicines, and it would be arrogant to assume that we know what works best. The only way to assure that we keep getting better solutions is by constantly testing different methods and compounds and using data to decide what works best. So, moving on to the second story today, MindMed has rejigged their leadership structure to have only one CEO, J.R. Ron. Let's hop right into the press release, stopping throughout to discuss what it means. We are not going to read it all, but just the important bits. MindMed has streamlined its leadership team to further develop the company's strategy of integrating its psychedelic clinical development programs with innovative digital technologies. As part of this, Stephen Hurst will retire from his co-CEO and executive chair positions, but will remain on the board of directors. Dr. Glick has retired from his position on the board of directors, but will continue to act as a scientific advisor. The vacancy on the board of directors created by Dr. Glick's retirement will be filled by the board after completing an extensive search and interview process for suitable candidates and as required as part of its NASDAQ uplisting application. So, a couple of quick notes here. First, Stephen Hurst is stepping back from his roles as co-CEO and executive chair, but will stay on the board. So, as for the role of co-CEO, I think that it's probably a good thing. Having multiple CEOs just makes things confusing for the public, and I have no idea how well it functioned within MindMed, but I would have to assume that having two people at the top complicates the command structure. Plus, J.R. Ron is the public face of the company, so it only makes sense that he is the sole CEO. And Hurst is still on the board, so that means MindMed won't lose his talents. What is more interesting is the wording around Dr. Glick's retirement from the board. It says that his replacement will be a suitable candidate as required as part of its NASDAQ uplisting application. So, if you remember in my NASDAQ video, we talked about how the NASDAQ now has a diversity requirement for the boards of directors of companies being accepted into it. This means that the board of any company being considered would have to have adequate female and minority representation. I did say at the time that I did not think it would apply to MindMed since they applied before the NASDAQ made this decision, but the wording here makes me start to second guess that analysis. Now, MindMed does have lots of female representation on their board. For example, their president is Dr. Miri Wernley, but it does appear that maybe they don't have any minority representation. I don't want to play the guess this person's race or sexual orientation game, but I'll throw a photo up of what the board looks like now. So, perhaps what MindMed is saying here is that they are looking for a minority representation on their board to ensure that the NASDAQ application goes through. If we scroll down a bit, we can also see this. Under the MindMed 2.0 leadership team, the company is also actively growing its digital medicine division for psychedelic medicines through the hiring of new technologists and undertaking potential technology platform acquisitions. So, JR has really been talking up Albert, MindMed's new digital medicines division, in most of his recent interviews, so it's no real surprise if this really is set to be an integral part of MindMed moving forward, that they have technologists in leadership positions at this company. The rest of the press release is just fluff about how amazing everybody is and how proud they all are of each other. So we don't really need to cover it. All that's important to know here is that J.R. Ron is now the sole CEO, which will probably help make the decision-making process easier, and that they are currently looking for a new board member who would aid in the NASDAQ application. And again, we will hold most of the discussion until the next video. Next up, we have our final press release for the day. MindMed signs partnership with a Swiss psychedelic drug discovery startup, Mindshift Compounds AG, expands development pipeline and IP portfolio with next-gen psychedelic and empathogenic compounds. And this was put out this week on February 11th, so it is very new news. And you will recall that in our recent video entitled More MindMed Catalysts, we discussed the possibility for partnerships in 2021, and here we will see some proof of it. So, hopping right in. As part of this partnership, MindMed and Mindshift Compounds AG have agreed to develop next-gen psychedelic and empathogenic substances together. The first initial compounds have already been synthesized by Mindshift Compounds IG, and related patent applications were filed by MindMed. MindMed plans to begin first-in-human phase 1 clinical trials as early as Q1 2022 through its existing clinical trial platform for psychedelic and empathogenic compounds in Switzerland. So, right off the bat, we get a couple cool pieces of info. Though they don't specify what the first compounds are, it appears that Mindshift has already developed these compounds that MindMed wants access to, hence why the two companies are partnering. Unfortunately though, or at least unfortunately for the impatient among us, none of the trials using the compounds Mindshift developed will start until 2022, though MindMed will own the patents to these compounds. Continuing, the partnership on these initial targets will expand MindMed's current well-established clinical pipeline with additional backup and expansion compounds with similar and potentially improved therapeutic properties. So again, MindMed already by far has the largest pipeline, so this just adds to it and gives me a gooey feeling inside. The related synthesis, intellectual property, and pharmaceutical technology will be owned outright by MindMed, and Mindshift Compounds AG will provide all intellectual property related to the new psychedelic compounds exclusively to MindMed. So here it just clarifies that this is not an equal partnership. MindMed is clearly in the driver's seat. They will own everything. I'm assuming that if these compounds are validated, MindMed will just buy Mindshift sometime in the future. Skipping ahead, the press release says that MindMed plans to work with the experienced drug discovery team at Mindshift Compounds AG to further broadly cover preclinical psychedelics research into novel compounds and expects to continue to file a substantial number of patents on a large number of novel substance matters, production innovations, and later clinical applications, allowing MindMed to further consolidate its leading position in the overall psychedelic medicines market as it moves these next-gen compounds into the clinic through advanced patient clinical trials. Wow, that was a long sentence. But so the important thing here is the word novel, as in novel compounds. Yes, LSD, psilocybin, and MDMA are great, but if MindMed validates the science behind any of these drugs, since they're in the public domain, any company will be able to piggyback off of their hard work and research and offer the same treatments. If they had novel compounds, like they do with 18MC by the way, they could be in a monopoly position if these drugs are effective. And I want to stress that I have zero idea what these compounds even are, let alone if they will be effective, so anything said on the potential for MindMed to use these compounds is just super speculation. If only I had a segment to discuss speculation. Moving on. The CEO of Mindshift says that the compounds we are working on are typically derivatives or analogs of well-known substances with psychedelic properties, such as phenethylamines, tryptamines, and ergolenes, and are therefore enhanced versions of both the established and classic psychedelic compounds such as mescaline, psilocybin, DMT, and LSD, as well as compounds with expected combined psychedelic and pathogenic effects profiles. These novel chemical structures, for example, MDMA and LSD-like compounds, are designed and synthesized with expected ameliorated psychoactive properties and duration of effect profiles with potential added therapeutic benefits. So, again, we get a little idea of the compounds that MindMed may be getting access to, calling them enhanced versions of drugs like DMT and LSD. And man, would I like to know what enhanced versions of DMT looks like. Do you see twice the number of machine elves? To finish this article off, we're going to look at a statement by the president of MindMed, Dr. Miri Wernley. And this is super important, so listen up. While first-generation psychedelic molecules such as psilocybin and LSD provide an obvious starting point for novel therapies such as psychedelic-assisted psychotherapy, there are clinical limitations to these compounds linked, for example, to the onset action and to the duration of effect, and this can cause concern for clinicians. Through the application of innovative medical chemistry and cutting-edge laboratory and computational technologies, we will expand the development of new, pure, and well-characterized active ingredients for next-gen pharmaceutical psychedelic drug products. We are developing a pipeline of novel, patentable psychedelic drug candidates that are specifically engineered to improve on first-generation psychedelic compounds, targeting predictable pharmacokinetics and shorter half-life that will result in better efficacy and reduced toxicity. We expect that synthesizing these next-gen psychedelic derivatives will be very useful to create predictable pharmaceutical-grade ingredients and will bear less regulatory risk in the overall mental health care system than working with natural compounds. And this quote right here, this might be the big one. Perhaps we will look back in 5 years, seeing the water behind our yachts, and think of this quote as the moment where MindMed's long-term plan crystallized. And it's this quote that will be the crux of the next video, which is being released at the same time, so you can watch that as soon as we finish here. But I will just reread a bit of what Dr. Wernley said. Maybe you will catch the significance here for the other projects, like Project Lucy. While first-generation psychedelic molecules, such as psilocybin and LSD, provide an obvious starting point for novel therapies such as psychedelic-assisted psychotherapy, there are clinical limitations to these compounds linked, for example, to the onset of action and the duration of effect. We will expand the development of new, pure, and well-characterized active ingredients for the next-gen pharmaceutical psychedelic drug products. We are developing a pipeline of novel, patentable psychedelic drug candidates that are specifically engineered to improve on first-generation psychedelic compounds. So take a moment to think about what is being said here. I bet you can guess where this is going in the next video, where we'll be speculating on this. To recap, over the past few weeks, MindMed has distributed a few press releases, all of which are super important for the future of the company. First, they are beginning a phase 1 clinical trial looking at how effective combining MDMA with LSD is, specifically for helping the minority of people who get anxiety when they take LSD. Second, they've restructured their board of directors, and now they only have one sole CEO, J.R. Ron. They are also looking for a board member who will help meet the NASDAQ uplisting requirements, which I believe means that they will need to hire a minority. And finally, MindMed has entered into an agreement with Mindshift Compounds AG and will have exclusive rights to all medicines the Swiss company will produce. While this would be noteworthy on its own, it's the statement from MindMed's president, Dr. Miri Wernley, that has me super excited, as I think it points us in the direction that MindMed is looking to go in. And again, stay tuned for the next episode, which will dive deeper into this. If you enjoy this video, smash that like button, subscribe, and leave us a comment telling us when you think MindMed's stock price will explode. And click on the video you see on your screen now to watch the next episode, which takes place in the speculation zone. I am very excited for it. Alright, psychedelic investors, this is James, signing out. I'll see you in the next video.